now.
Hello, my name's Al Beck. I'm the Director of Psychology and Psychotherapy for SLAM. I'd like to welcome you to this broadcast, which is part of a series of broadcasts on the theme of psychological resilience building. Today we'll be talking to a group of people involved in work across agencies with people who hoard, and we'll be focusing particularly on a fire station hoarding group. But before we get on to that, I'll just explain a little bit about the background for these broadcasts and invite you to take part in them through the question and answer function, where you can post questions for the people who are the speakers who are part of the conversation, but you can also reply to questions that other people post. The purpose of these broadcasts is really to engage people from a broad community base to think together about how we can develop services which, as it were, shine a light on the great work that's being done in our local communities to prevent mental health problems developing and to support those people who have begun to develop issues that they need to deal with. So obviously most of the work of preventing mental health problems takes place outside of secondary mental health care. That's not to belittle the great work that goes on in secondary mental health care, and indeed we will be focusing on the work of psychologists and psychotherapists from a wide range of backgrounds and practices, and how they're working with local community groups to build on the strengths that those community groups already have in making and helping our communities to be resilient. Particularly important, of course, in the context of a pandemic and the heightened levels of anxiety that we all experience as a result of that. And I'm sure that our speakers today will mention that, and we would invite you also to think about what can be done in this particular context. Not least because people don't experience the pandemic equally. It is in many ways exacerbating the health inequalities that we are so concerned about in mental health. And I think the one thing that binds us all is a knowledge that we need to do something about that. So without further ado, I'd like to ask our speakers to introduce themselves to you, and then we'll get into understanding a little bit about this broadcast today. So if I can hand over first of all to Caroline Harrison and ask her to introduce herself. Caroline.
Hi, I'm Caroline Harrison and I'm a CBT and EMDR therapist. I work at the Centre for Anxiety Disorders and Trauma at the Maudsley, and I facilitate with colleagues the hoarding group at Dockhead Fire Station.
Thanks, Caroline. Phil Morton, could you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Phil Morton. I have the privilege of being the Borough Commander on behalf of the London Fire Brigade for Southwark Borough. Borough itself, the borders don't align exactly in accordance with the local authority border, so we do also represent areas of Lewisham and Lambeth as well. My responsibilities are for operational firefighters, providing a service in terms of operational response, so firefighting. You may see us attend road traffic collisions or flooding incidents, but equally as importantly, actually prevention activities and community safety. So this particular group and hoarding itself that we're here to talk about today is very important to me, as it is something which is becoming more and more prevalent within this borough and across London. And for me, I'm passionate about keeping the residents of Southwark as safe as possible. And any information that we can share and any support that we can provide to residents and those that we're all responsible for it is absolutely fantastic in my eyes in terms of keeping people safe in their homes.
Thanks, Phil. And Sue Bexley, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Sue Bexley and I am a hoarder, and I've been attending these sessions since June 2019.
Thanks, Sue. So maybe we can start, Caroline, by if you could explain a little bit about the initiative for working with hoarding across agencies and how this fire station hoarding group came to be set up.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, so we started the group in November 2018, and it's a joint venture between CADAT, London Fire Brigade and Southwark Council. It was actually the idea of Phil's predecessor to set this up. Hoarding is when people have persistent difficulty with discarding possessions. Sometimes that's also involves excessive acquiring. And that can lead to accumulation of clutter in people's homes, which can sometimes prevent them, or often prevent them, from using their rooms for the purpose that they're intended. So that can obviously cause a lot of distress and significant impairment. And it's quite a difficult problem to crack on your own. And there's also quite a lot of stigma around it. So people often feel quite ashamed of it. It's not always helped by the media portrayal of hoarding, I have to say. But hoarding affects a lot of people. It affects between 1.5 and 6% of the population. It affects men and women equally from both high and low socioeconomic groups. And there's a lot of reasons why people might have difficulties with hoarding. So sometimes hoarding problems can start after a loss or a bereavement. Sometimes people might have had a background of deprivation or trauma. Or they might view objects as being particularly useful and feel like they can't waste anything. Perhaps objects might feel safer than people or fulfill a need that hasn't been met elsewhere.
So that's a huge proportion of people, up to 6% of the population who may have hoarding difficulties. Would you anticipate that those problems would be harder or easier during a pandemic? Would a highly anxious situation like a pandemic affect the prevalence at all?
I'm sure it could. I mean, Sue, what would you like to comment here?
Well, with this pandemic, obviously I haven't been buying as much because I've not been going out so much, but it's what I have in the home. I've not been sorting out as much because there's nowhere to store it. I haven't been able to move it to go anywhere else. But some other people, it hasn't really affected me mentally because I've got very good friends, but I know a lot of people it has, and some of them are from the Hoarding therapy place that we attend, and they've found it very difficult.
So can you tell us a little bit, maybe Caroline, about the group, how it runs, and you know, how it goes about supporting these different groups of people?
Sure. I mean, obviously a big thing at the moment with COVID is that we haven't been able to run it because we haven't been able to have face-to-face groups. So that's a real problem. But, you know, knowing all the issues with hoarding, and also there are a few risks to people who have hoarding problems. So sometimes there might be trips and falls, or maybe if they sometimes if the clutter falls on them, that can cause injury, or sometimes there might be issues with if insects or mice get in, and Phil's going to talk a bit more about the fire risk. But knowing all these factors, we really wanted to set up a group where people could come anonymously if they wanted to, where they could feel supported. Sorry? Where they could feel supported and there wouldn't be any stigma or shame, and they could get emotional support. And so that's what we set up. So it's at the fire station. Our group there's lots of good hoarding support groups out there, but our group is different because we offer, it's facilitated by a CBT therapist. So we offer a CBT intervention for hoarding. And also it's different because we have it at the fire station. So yeah, we have a CBT session every month. That's a very structured CBT session. And then the rest of the sessions in the month, the members of the group pick a topic that they want to discuss about hoarding, and then we problem solve around that. So that might be helping people make decisions about discarding, or how to reduce acquiring, or issues of trauma or grief, or something like that.
So we've had a question from the audience about how people refer to this group. Do the people refer themselves? Can people just turn up? Is it just for the people of Southwark, or, you know, is it a specifically commissioned service? I guess it'd be helpful also to think about, you know, how else it could be set up, where else it could occur.
Sure.
I don't think it just needs to be in fire stations.
So no, absolutely. So at the moment, people just turn up. Well, obviously, when the group is running, at the moment, because of COVID, we're not running. But people can they don't even need to fill in a referral form. They can just turn up. It's obviously funded by Southwark, and one of the good things that we need to think about going forward, because there's lots of people who want to attend from outside of Southwark, so we're trying to think about how to make it fairer and whether we could do it across boroughs so that it's not just Southwark who are funding it and other boroughs joining it.
Phil, could you talk a little bit about why the fire service are involved?
Of course, yes. Fire safety, as I've already pertained, is of paramount importance to us. And part of, a key core of my role really is to identify opportunities within the community to provide community support, to keep people as safe as I possibly can in their homes. And certainly within the Borough of Southwark, and in my experience around London as a borough commander in different boroughs, hoarding is something which we are certainly becoming more and more aware of. It may be that cases are increasing, or it may be that we are just better at identifying and supporting individuals. I very much suspect it's a little bit of both. But in terms of hoarding, any flammable material in a property increases the risk to individuals within that property, especially if it's linked to other risk factors such as smoking, cooking in proximity to some of the hoarded material. Often we find people will plug their electrical sources into extension leads or into kind of multi-plug adapters. And again, if that is close to flammable material, i.e. hoarded material, then we find it significantly increases the chance of a fire in the home. And obviously it goes without saying that that is something I want to prevent very, very much. Certainly, and forgive me, but the last two fatal fires that we've had within the Borough of Southwark have both been in premises that are hoarded. And it really does increase the risk, not only to the resident themselves who live in that property, but also to other residents within the building. Often it's a communal building, so it does increase the risk for others living in a similar building. And actually something that can be overlooked is that it significantly increases the risk to firefighters who are attending the incident as well. And that's purely because, the building compartments aren't designed to have such a large fire loading within them, such a lot of material that's flammable. And therefore, when firefighters enter that building, the fire often develops much more quickly than we would expect, or is far fiercer than we would expect. So it's really important for us and for me to support people in understanding the risks associated with hoarding in their home, but also to gather information to help me protect my firefighters as well.
Sue, we've got a question from the audience here about how hoarding is often kind of ridiculed in the media, isn't it? It's somehow portrayed as something that everybody laughs at, that people just like to laugh at people who hoard. And I wonder what your experience has been of that, and what in order to overcome and work together around keeping us all safe, how do you think that has changed over time, and what part has this group played in that for you?
Well, my friend sort of came around my house, which I haven't had anybody come around my house for a long time, and she see the amount of clothes that I have, and she said it's a fire hazard. And I went to the doctors, and the doctor referred me to somebody, and then they referred me to this group. And this group has been so helpful, because I didn't even class myself as a hoarder. I just knew I had a lot of clothes. And since I've been going, I pledge something every week, and then I go home, and whatever I've pledged, I do, because I don't like go back to the group the following week and say I haven't done it. So I've got rid of, in the past year, I've got rid of 15, I think now, full black sacks of clothes, which if I hadn't have gone, then they would still be there, and I'd still be getting more and more clothes in. And the reason that I started buying so many clothes, my daughter reckons it is when my ex left me, so a bit of trauma, but I thought it started when my mum and dad passed away. And also I had an operation on my hand, so I couldn't do any ironing. So instead of doing ironing, I bought more clothes, which seems ridiculous. Also, I know it's kind of illness. I know some people think that you're totally mad. You're not mad, but there is something there that's blocking you for getting rid of things. Is that okay? Does that answer your question, or did I leave something out?
No, that's a really helpful answer. But you do seem to have related the hoarding behaviour to 2 times when you were particularly distressed. So it does seem like it serves a purpose for you, a function for you. And I was and that's something actually somebody else in the audience has really drawn out and said that this particular individual said that sort of a mild hoarding behaviour is something that sometimes people do that makes them feel safe in one way or another, or to manage panic or anxiety. I wondered if that was something that you'd noticed.
Yeah, it is a bit, but I do thank the group because they talk about their experiences and I talk about mine, and we all seem to help each other. And I think that I'd be in a worse state than what I am now if there hadn't been that group.
Thanks, Sue. Phil, I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about whether the, going back to this idea of the media portraying hoarding behaviours in a, not very helpful way, as sort of a figure of fun rather than, the kind of serious issue that it can be. Whether that had any impact on people working in the fire service, whether, the stigma around hoarding behaviours has changed as a result of working in the fire service and what you've seen?
Thanks for coming back to me at this point, Alison. I think that's a really good point. Certainly, for me, I'm very comfortable and very confident that every firefighter that works for me and for the London Fire Brigade are wholly committed to providing the absolute best possible service we can for the residents of London. And in this instance, understanding and working with people within the Hoarding group is such a fantastic opportunity to better understand the challenges they have in their lives, for us to offer support to those individuals. Just last year, Caroline and I and some of our teams cooked a Christmas lunch and dinner for the Hoarding group, and it was a lovely opportunity to sit and meet with people, to understand their lives, to get to know them better, and actually most importantly to be able to support those individuals and for them not to feel castigated by the press or to feel that they can't knock on a fire station door should they be concerned on a late night, or if a fire engine drives by, they should feel that they can wave and stop and talk to us. Because, as I said right at the beginning of this, my role really is about community safety, not just fire prevention. And for me to engage with the community, to work with individuals, to better understand the people that I'm serving, and for them to feel confident enough to come to me and my team, it is my highest priority, really. So it's such a wonderful opportunity just to get to know people, as well as the partnerships we've made with various teams, Caroline and her team, so that when we become aware of somebody that needs support, we also have that kind of contact list, if you like, where we can give that member of the public the best possible service.
So you'd really like to be a kind of frontline point of contact for people with people who hoard, to come to you and maybe ask for your help or advice. Is that how I've understood it? Absolutely. We would like to be a point of contact for any member of public with any concern that they may have. I think it's so important that as a fire service, members of the public, regardless of the challenges they face in their personal lives, be that hoarding, be that issues with their utilities at home or their care packages that are provided on behalf of social services, I very much want the public to be able to say to a firefighter, please, can you help me in some way? And whatever that request may be, I very much expect my teams, and both in terms of firefighters as well as my management team, to be able to put people into contact with those that can provide that support. So community engagement and those big red doors on the fire station,
not being barriers to the public is very, very important to me. It should be seen as a community resource where if anybody has any concerns, they can come to us and we will do our very, very best to help them.
And Phil, what would you need from secondary mental health care, and indeed from any other aspect of statutory services, or indeed community, charity, voluntary sector, faith groups? What would you need to make that a reality for you? How can others help you?
I think specifically in terms of the Hoarding group, we have to recognise that whilst we have a fantastic facility at Dockhead Fire Station, which we're really keen to open up to the community and share amongst various groups, including the Hoarding group, that we are a limited resource. And I think in modern society, it's so important that all of us as professionals, including the third sector and charitable teams, as well as residents associations, residents groups, we come together to support one another with resources, both in terms of meeting places, but also it may be support for to have somebody to talk to. If other teams and groups are able to facilitate a similar forum to that which is provided at Dockhead Fire Station with the Hoarding group, it enables us to support so many more people in the community. I think it's fair to say that it's a very effective group. It's very well attended at Dockhead. But if we could broaden, if we could spread our wings more and support more people, that is something that I'm particularly passionate about. And so any support.
Just to follow up from again, a member of the audience just asking, so how could I, as a member of the public, come and knock on your door? I don't go up to the big red fire station door and knock on the door and say, can you give me some assistance? What would be a comfortable way for people to approach you, or would you suggest that would happen through maybe other agencies?
I beg your pardon, Alison, was that directed at me? Or...
That was directed at you, yes.
Was,
so I know you're very approachable, obviously, as a human being, Phil, but how would the general public know to, where would they go? How would I know where to go?
Well, in answer to the first part of the question, first and foremost, absolutely, banging on that big red door of a fire station will get a firefighter to come out front and provide support to someone. Every fire station has a front door with a public bell that they can ring, and a firefighter will come to the door and provide support as long as they're obviously not out at an incident. There's also a telephone on the outside of every fire station, which when lifted will take you directly through to our control room. So again, if there's an emergency, people can have direct support from a control member of staff. In terms of somebody who may wish to have support through Hoarding, again, if they were to ring the doorbell at any of the fire stations within the borough of Southwark, so that's the fire station at Dockhead, there's a fire station at Old Kent Road, and there's a fire station at Peckham. All of those stations have got information on this Hoarding group and will be able to provide the relevant information to contact myself and Caroline to request attendance. But similarly, support through various mental health teams, Caroline's team and our partners within the local authority, any referrals which are made to those individual teams will also be referred directly to Caroline and or myself for us to provide a position within the Hoarding group at Dockhead. Thanks,
Phil. Caroline, could you talk a little bit more about what a psychotherapist brings to this and how you work currently and how you might like to work in with other groups, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Sue said, something just stops you from throwing stuff away, and that can be quite anxiety provoking and also quite stressful. So as therapists, then we help the client to understand what it is that's stopping them and maybe to work through some issues that might be stopping them. I think also helping people understand, what's kind of maintaining the problem with the clutter, what's kind of keeping it going, why is there a need to keep buying stuff and not throw stuff away. So, but it's working collaboratively. So it's like all good therapy, really. You're working collaboratively, and we're never wanting to kind of make judgments about the client or to be telling the client what to do, really. We're just kind of enabling them with some tools to kind of come up with a way of kind of going forward. Sue, would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, the exercises that we do, like the patting of the legs, that helps. Also, I don't know, it's just coming to see you and all your colleagues there just helps, and it helps you breathe better, if that makes sense. I don't know how to explain it, but you're just, don't know, you're not building it up inside, it's coming out, talking to the others, and I just don't think that I would have managed anywhere near what I have if I hadn't come to you. And all the people that work there are just brilliant, and I just love you all, the way you just handle everything, and you don't judge us. Judgment is very hard to take from people, and you don't judge us. That's the best thing there ever.
Well, thanks, Sue.
Sue, can I ask a question from the audience, which is, you know, and it's again going back to this stigma that you just talked about, you know, the judgment that society can kind of throw at you. So somebody in the audience has asked, you know, how do you start a conversation really with somebody about hoarding when that person maybe doesn't recognise that they are hoarding? How can that conversation be started in a kind of non-judgmental way? What's the way that worked best for you?
Well, the way mine came about was one of my friends came round my house and saw how much clutter and clothes that I had, and she had a meeting with a couple of other friends, and then she sat me down and she said to me, I'm really scared and worried about you, that there is a fire hazard in your home, and we really do need to do something about it. And you have a little cry and you think about it, and then I thought, yes, my next move is go and see a doctor, talk to a doctor about it, and it went from there. And I think anybody that is hoarding and doesn't realise it's what they're doing, and if they have got a very close friend that can talk to them about it, it's the best move ever. It just, you know, no shouting, no sort of saying, well, don't do this, you should throw this away. Just talk normally and say that they're worried about you. And that's how mine came about, having very, very good friends.
That's great. I'm wondering about, for anyone really, I'm wondering about this issue of kind of almost making it into a medical problem when, as you just say, it's just a human behaviour. We can all get into it. And whether there are maybe kind of non-exposing ways where you don't have to go to a doctor. Would there be another way to get into this sort of work that we have currently located in sort of secondary mental health services, but obviously we can place it elsewhere? Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, just to mention the DocHead group, anyone who thinks that when we're running, when COVID's not preventing us from running, anyone can just turn up to that. You know, you don't have to have got to the point where you know, someone's expressed concern or a housing officer has made a referral. You can just turn up and talk it through. So yeah, I agree. I mean, it is a behaviour that we do and that lots of people do, and you know, can be more problematic for some than others, and it doesn't always have to be medicalised. But yeah, people can just turn up if they want to when the group is on.
Who would you like to be partnering with, Caroline? How would you like to see this developing? Where would you see the next steps as being? If you really wanted to, I mean, if there's a 6% prevalence rate, that's actually very high. It's a lot of people. I assume you can't see them all in your fire station group.
No, I mean, I think we're really privileged to be able to work with the fire brigade, and also it's been really helpful in that group attendees also get to know the firefighters, and then might be more inclined to agree to a home fire safety visit. So that's a really helpful partnership. We're very fortunate to have our partnership with Southwark Council, who are putting a lot of effort into hoarding. But I think just more education with housing officers, social workers, councils generally, and being able to facilitate more psychological and emotional support for people that isn't stigmatising is the way forward. And, you know, we welcome that from all community groups, really.
So that's great. I think we're going to have to leave it there, but basically I'm sure you're all happy to be approached for anyone who wants to think about how we can develop these services more widely. I'd like to thank the audience, and I'd like to thank the speakers, Sue Bexley, Phil Morton and Caroline Harrison, for a really interesting broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.